Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Another deep dive.
You know it.
Awesome.
You know what has me feeling extra celebratory today?
Let me guess. Is it that you finally conquered that mountain of laundry that you've been ignoring?
That's like every day, my friend. No, it's something way more exciting.
Yeah?
It's Lunar New Year.
Ooh.
Or should I say Chinese New Year?
Ooh. Careful there. You're wading into some seriously choppy waters.
I know.
You know how people get about this whole naming thing?
I know.
Might get canceled before we even finish this sentence.
Right. It's wild how one little phrase can cause such a ruckus.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's a holiday. Nobody's getting canceled for saying Merry Christmas, even if you aren't Christian.
Well, this is about more than just holiday greetings, though.
Kind of making me scratch my head every time it pops up online.
Every year, same drama, right?
They go, it's that time again, Lunar New Year. And you know how the internet just explodes. But this year, it's gotten extra spicy. People are seriously fired up about, you guessed it.
Seriously? Is it still that whole Chinese New Year versus Lunar New Year?
Still going strong. It's like suddenly everyone's a cultural ambassador debating the finer points of like ancient traditions and stuff.
Okay, so let's break this down. Why is everyone so worked up about this? What's the big deal with the name?
Well, that's what we're diving into today, folks. Honestly, I was scrolling through my feed and I was like, hold up, is there some secret Lunar New Year council deciding these things? Am I out of the loop?
A Lunar New Year council. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that meeting.
Right. Secret handshakes, red envelopes full of ancient wisdom. Okay, I'm getting carried away. No secret council, but seriously, why is it such a touchy subject for some people?
Don't worry, we've got you covered. We did our homework, went full-on in investigative journalist mode for this one. Articles, social media posts, historical deep dives. We even consulted the ancient scrolls.
You and those scrolls. But seriously, folks, we've got a ton of info to unpack here.
So let's start with the basics, right? We all know Lunar New Year is a huge deal in a lot of Asian countries, yeah? Family, food, fireworks, good times. But why are some people so adamant about calling it Chinese New Year?
Right. What's the deal with that?
Well, historically speaking, Lunar New Year did originate in China. Way, way back, thousands of years ago, all tied to the lunar calendar and whatnot.
Oh, the lunar calendar. My nemesis.
As Chinese culture spread, so did the celebration. Took root in Korea, Vietnam, even parts of Japan.
Makes sense. So for a lot of people, Chinese New Year is about acknowledging those roots, respecting the OG celebration.
Exactly. But here's where things get interesting. The Lunar New Year party didn't just stay in China, you know?
Right, it traveled.
Exactly. And as it spread, it evolved. Every culture added its own spice, its own traditions, meanings, you know.
Ooh, like a recipe. Grandma's secret ingredient situation.
I like that. So that's where the Lunar New Year argument comes in. It's about recognizing that, yeah, it started in China, but it's become something different, something special in other cultures too.
So it's kind of like pizza. Started in Italy, but now it's everywhere with all sorts of crazy toppings.
Perfect analogy. And Lunar New Year acknowledges that global, diverse pizza party, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just a one-way street.
That makes sense. Like Korean New Year Seollal is all about ancestral rites and special foods, which is pretty different from how it's celebrated in China.
Exactly. And then you have Vietnam, where Tet Nguyen Lan is this vibrant celebration with peach blossoms and 5 fruit platters.
Wow.
It's all connected, but with its own flavor.
Okay, so we've got Lunar New Year making its way throughout Asia. But how did this whole Lunar New Year versus Chinese New Year debate blow up on like the global stage?
Well, as the world becomes increasingly interconnected, the words we use carry more weight. Some argue that Lunar New Year is more inclusive, acknowledging the celebrations in various Asian cultures.
And then there's the other side of the argument, the people who see Chinese New Year as a point of cultural pride and kind of push back against any perceived attempt to erase that connection.
Right. It's a clash of perspectives.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have the UN, which officially recognizes Lunar New Year as a holiday. You'd think that would settle it right.
You would think.
But it doesn't. The debate rages on.
So we've got these two camps, each with their own valid points. One's all about honoring history. The other's about recognizing that the party's gotten bigger.
It's like they're speaking different languages, even though they're talking about the same delicious dumplings.
Okay, but let's be real here. It's not just about semantics, is it? This whole debate is tapping into something way deeper.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking cultural ownership, national pride, global identity, all wrapped up in one big red envelope of controversy.
And trust me, folks, when we dug into the research, things got interesting. Like fireworks at dawn interesting.
Yeah, let's just say some people online were ready to fight a dragon over this.
Seriously, a dragon.
Okay, maybe not a dragon. You know what I mean. Like, we saw articles about Chinese netizens going on this whole crusades to, like, correct anyone using Lunar New Year.
Wait, hold on. Netizens, is that like a internet slang? I'm too old to know.
Pretty much. It's basically anyone who's, like, super active online.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, we're talking about people in China who were really, really vocal about sticking with Chinese New Year. Like, they were calling out celebrities and everything.
Oh, yeah. Didn't that happen to, like, Lu Wen, that Chinese model?
Exactly. She posted Happy Lunar New Year on Instagram. And, oh, boy, the backlash was intense. People were leaving comments like she'd committed a crime or something.
Wow. So she basically got canceled for saying Lunar New Year. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. She ended up apologizing and changing the post to say Chinese New Year. It just shows you how much this stuff matters to some people.
I mean, I get it. Cultural identity is important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, can't we all just enjoy the holiday without, starting a war over what to call it?
Oh, tell that to the internet.
Yeah.
But what's interesting? Our research also showed that some people, especially in Southeast Asia, are actually choosing to use Lunar New Year, like on purpose, to kind of distance themselves from China politically.
Ooh, that's a whole other layer to this.
Yeah.
So it's not just about being accurate. It's also about, like, global politics and history.
Exactly. It's complicated stuff. Like in Indonesia, they use the term Imlek, which comes from like a Hokkien pronunciation of lunar calendar. So it's a way to celebrate without, getting tangled up in any political drama.
So basically the name you choose is like a statement in itself. Kind of like a political t-shirt, but for holidays.
Right. And, this whole Lunar New Year versus Chinese New Year debate actually reminds me of some other stuff we've seen online. Remember that whole controversy about hanbok, the traditional Korean clothing?
Oh, yeah. There are all those arguments about whether it originated in China or Korea. And some Chinese influencers even wore hanbok in their videos, which, like, sparked outrage in Korea. It was wild.
It was like a cultural fashion showdown. And then there was that whole thing about the Dragon Boat Festival, too, with both China and Korea claiming it as their own. It seems like every other week there's a new fight online about who owns what tradition.
So it's not just about Lunar New Year. There's this bigger tension about who gets to claim these cultural traditions.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of cultural ownership comes in. It's basically the claim to exclusive rights over traditions, practices, even objects, like, saying only my family can make grandma's secret apple pie recipe.
Even though everyone else might love it and even, like, put their own spin on it.
Right. Which brings us back to our big question. How do we navigate this whole Lunar New Year thing? Both sides have valid points. So where does that leave us? How do we even talk about this without, like, accidentally stepping on a cultural landmine?
Yeah, that's a good question. Especially for, like, us regular folks who just want to enjoy the celebrations and not, get caught in the crossfire.
Well, from our research, the big thing is cultural sensitivity. No matter what you call it, it's important to understand the history, acknowledge the different ways it's celebrated, and just be respectful of different perspectives.
So even if you personally like to say Chinese New Year, you should still be aware that it's not just a Chinese holiday anymore, and that other countries have their own unique ways of celebrating it.
Exactly. And on the flip side, even if you prefer Lunar New Year because it's more inclusive, you should still recognize the origins and the importance of the celebration in Chinese culture.
Got it. So after all this research, what are some key takeaways we can share with our listeners?
Well, first off, Lunar New Year celebrations are incredibly diverse and widespread,
Right.
encompassing numerous Asian cultures.
Yeah.
It's not just a Chinese thing. It's a beautiful tapestry of traditions and customs.
Right. And each culture puts its own unique spin on the festivities, even though they share a common root. Be informed, be respectful, and maybe stay away from those heated internet debates, unless you're really in the mood for virtual fireworks.
Exactly. Now, there's actually one more interesting angle to this that we haven't touched on yet, which is how globalization is changing all these traditions.
Ooh, tell me more. Are you going to put on your professor voice for this?
Maybe a little. But seriously, think about it. The world's getting smaller, right? So traditions like Lunar New Year aren't just stuck in one place anymore. They're celebrated all over the globe, influencing and being influenced by other cultures.
So Lunar New Year is going global, huh?
Yep.
Kind of like,
Wink, wink. Always plugging the podcast. But you're right, though. It's kind of amazing to see, even here in the West. More and more Lunar New Year stuff popping up every year. It's like this big multicultural party.
Which is awesome. Who doesn't love a party? But then it's like, how do we make sure those traditions are being shared, the right way?
Exactly.
It doesn't become some weird cultural mishmash.
Being aware, educating ourselves, and just being open to learning about other cultures, on their own terms.
So maybe instead of getting hung up on the name, we should all be like learning more about the actual traditions, the meaning behind it all, like a deep dive into culture.
I like the way you think. Curiosity and open-mindedness, that's the key.
So what's the verdict then? Should our listeners be saying Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year? Which side are we on?
I think the takeaway here is bigger than just picking a label. It's about understanding how complex this stuff is, right?
Yeah.
Cultural heritage, global world, it's all intertwined. Being respectful of different viewpoints, acknowledging history, but also embracing how traditions change.
Deep, man. Deep. So no right or wrong answer, just lots to think about, along with all those delicious dumplings, of course.
Exactly. And hey, if our listeners are feeling extra curious, want to explore more about global cultures, maybe even enjoy a little whiskey tasting to ring in the new year, no matter what they call it, they should definitely check out Mickytolife on YouTube.
Yes. Shout out to Mickytolife. Always a good time over there.
And remember, folks, it's all about celebrating those connections and appreciating the richness that different cultures bring to our world.
Okay, so circling back to our listeners, what stands out to you in all of this?
Yeah.
Which term feels most appropriate for you and why? Hit us up on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
This raises an important question, too.
Okay.
In our increasingly interconnected world, how do we celebrate cultural diversity while also respecting the origins and traditions of a holiday like this?
Such a good point. And who knows, maybe by next Lunar New Year, we'll all have a deeper understanding of this complex and beautiful holiday.
Cheers to that.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Sip and Talk.
Woo!
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year, or whichever term resonates with you. We'll catch you next time.
Cheers.